and the mute speak the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Last week, I was privileged to watch a film entitled CODA. CODA is an acronym for Children of Deaf Adults. I recommend it highly. There is no way I could watch a movie like that and not find this become more 3D for me. It just jumped off the page reading it this time in the light of that story of a teenage girl whose parents and brother, whose whole family but her, were deaf. I cried and I laughed at several points. It was painful to watch this deaf family try desperately to communicate with the world. You and I, we know how challenging communication can be, sometime even in hearing homes and hearing friendships. We all know, and we are all somewhere on the spectrum at any point in time in any relationship regarding our ability to hear and to speak. Communication is a challenging thing, and I think we're lucky sometimes when it works. The film is full of awkward and embarrassing moments that I'm sure most all people who are deaf experience again and again. I was exhausted just watching the only hearing person in the family, this teenage girl, try continuously to interpret in sign for them all day long. The only experience I had that was somewhat similar was when I had the opportunity to go to Argentina with a few grad students, and all of us, my friends and I, did not know Spanish, hardly at all, and only one of us did. His name was Terry Quinn. He's Jen Quinn's husband. And poor Terry, he was beat by the end of every day because, honest to God, he was interpreting constantly, listening carefully, trying to find the right Spanish word for the English-speaking people who barely speak English sometimes. I mean, he was truly exhausted, and watching this film, I got exhausted for this girl. That family could not connect with anyone without her interpreting. I can't imagine living in a world so dependent on somebody, anybody, who could help me understand and be understood. And the loneliness of her family, to be in the midst of a room full of laughing people, and they all could hear nothing. Nothing. At one point, in the midst, in that one scene, they stopped all the sound in the movie. And we who were watching it, we became the deaf ones. It was unsettling, incredibly unsettling to me, and the isolation triggered anxiety in me and reminded me how lucky I am to be able to hear. And when her classmates mocked her parents for the sounds, the grunts, the groanings, almost something like a moan that came from their mouths because they were mute from not being able to hear, the mouths of the deaf that leaves them unable to speak, she cowered. She cowered from life. She cowered from her friends. She became somewhat cynical and distant. I think they call that social anxiety these days. How could it not be social anxiety? The father signed to his son in an argument they were having together, and you could even feel them shouting at each other by the rigorousness of their gestures. The father signed to his son because the son wanted to start a fair trade fishing industry that these two deaf people were going to lead the people of the village to do. And at one point, the dad signed, "We're the deaf guys." They'd look at us like we're a joke. I got to say, this movie woke me up to the world of the deaf and the hearing powerfully. Turn then with me, if you would, to this story from Mark's gospel. This deaf guy off to the side of the road, out of it, disconnected from everyone and everything, lost. He did not hear all this commotion. All he heard was this eerie silence. Maybe that awful ringing in his ears that will not stop, and nothing to distract him from that ringing. And all of a sudden, as if out of nowhere, someone grabs him and yanks him to his feet. He's confused, he's turned around, he's scared, and they drag him forward. The seeing people all around were annoyed, themselves turned around by this man. They knew him as Yeshua, Jesus, and they could hear him ask for the deaf man. And so the hearing helped him to this Jesus. Yeshua stops everything. He climbs down into this man's black hole. This man's hell, which is everything empathy is. Our willingness to climb down into another human being's black hole, their hell with them, not to fix it, but to meet them there. I know this man. How often have I not been able to speak because of my fears? Unable to hear because of my fears. Jesus' courage to climb down there and be with him in that. In what was causing this terrifying disconnection from people. His deaf ears that kept him unable to speak. When people connect, when people really hear each other, they then learn how to speak. Communication is a miracle. It's a miracle for this man, but it's a miracle for you and me too. It's a miracle that we can understand each other sometimes and be understood given our histories, our background, what words mean to us, our experiences. The deafening silence begins to open for this man. Open him to these people. Open him to this one who cared enough to climb into that black hole with him, to listen to what he did not even know how to say. And what does Jesus do while he's down in that hell with him? He groans. No words, a grunt. He grunts like the deaf, mute man did. He makes a sound that throws a lot of people away from them because it's so horrifying. He makes the same sound as the deaf mute could only do. And then Yeshua, Jesus says, in his own tongue, in words we who can hear, Ephata, Ephata. He groaned, he grunted, he cried out, be open. It was not so much his hearing that was restored by this gesture of pure love and compassion and empathy. It was his whole life that was restored. He was restored to other human beings. He was still restored to community, reconnected to others to whom he had never been able to connect again. That's the miracle. And every time it happens in our human lives, it's a miracle that people can really connect and understand each other in this world. It's a miracle. There are several people I know whose hearing is disappearing, who live in a world of hearing aids and cochlear implants. They live in a world where the hearing gets so mad at them just because they can't hear us. And they keep asking us to repeat again. That brings a whole conversation, it seems to us, to a halt. Those lucky enough to hear become the frustrated and impatient ones, the truly deaf ones. And I have been that person, angry, because he or she kept asking me to repeat. And I'm embarrassed to admit that, but I'm embarrassed even more to say that I did that with my own dad. And a friend just brought me, when she was going through some stuff to help me out, get organized. She found my dad's hearing aids. And she put them in my hands. And next to my little $2, probably $1.50 First Communion statue, I have my dad's hearing aids now to remind me to not go deaf. My hearing made me deaf. But how about the continuing frustration of the deaf? Disconnected, isolated, lost? How about the people who have other issues like depression and horrible anxiety that is like deafness because they find themselves cut off from the human community, cut off by that limitation? You and I, we can help them hear, maybe again, maybe for the first time. Our hearing can help them hear, connect, get beyond that limitation. Our empathy, our willingness to climb into that black hole with them can open them back up into relationship, into community. You guys, this whole thing, it's just too beautiful for words. And so I'm going to stop talking now.